Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We have a lot of news happening today, and I would like to get into it, so let's jump straight in. Here's an interesting post from Fox News. It says Pakistani man with ties to Iran charged in foiled assassination plot, potentially targeting Trump, DOJ says. And this is a very interesting comment at the bottom here. Man, they're really trying every possible angle to get this war going. And that was my first thought when I saw it as well. So it seems like they are really putting a lot of effort into getting this war started, which brings us to the next post right above. 7 U.S. personnel, 5 service members, and 2 civilian contractors were injured in yesterday's rocket attack by Iranian-backed forces against al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq. 5 were able to receive treatment for minor injuries at al-Assad, while 2 had to be airlifted for further medical treatment. I'm not saying this attack was not legitimate. However, the U.S. does have a history of allowing stuff to happen that it knows about in order to use that as leverage for starting kinetic energy action. Is this one of those cases? I don't know. We will have to wait and see what happened. All right, as we continue up, big news in Ukraine. New York, Ukraine, has been captured by the Russians. As I'm seeing it, Russia is just continuing to pick up more and more momentum. And whether we're talking about business or your personal life or sports or war or any facet of life, momentum is very key to understanding the situation and the context of what's happening. And from my perspective, I am seeing Russia gain more and more momentum. So it says here the Russian flag was raised over the school building by soldiers from the 9th Motorized Rifle Brigade. Here's some more information from Britain. A month ago, the British government announced an overcrowding of British prisons and that it was thinking of releasing inmates early. Now the government is scrambling to find enough cells inside its prison to house all the people they sentence in the Southport riots, their own citizens, versus the non-native personnel who are instigating all this. So we can see that the governments of Western civilization are protecting the non-natives and attacking the natives. And here's a interesting philosophical note on that. Governments historically seek to protect the things that they consider assets and get rid of the things they see as risks. So, if we see governments protecting non-native citizens and attacking citizens, you should be able to easily discern what the government thinks of those two groups, assets and risks. And then you have to ask yourself, why would the government consider non-natives to be assets compared to natives? Is it because they have an agenda regarding population? Is it because they have an agenda regarding control? Is it because they have something in mind that is not overtly obvious, but if you do the research, you will be able to find why they would consider non-natives assets and natives risks. I found this to be interesting. I've heard much about this from other nations, but I did not know the U.S. had their own. Makes sense that they do. So row-row vessels, roll-on, roll-off vessels. This here says, a decade ago, Special Operations Command began quietly converting a modern roll-on, roll-off cargo ship into a highly customized, cutting-edge, clandestine command center, mobile mothership, and forward sea base. MV Ocean Trader has the capability to house a total of 209 special warfighting personnel, enough stores and provisions for 45 days of operations, and the capability to refuel and replenish at sea, along with the capacity to launch, recover, refuel, and resupply up to 4 small aircraft, including UAVs. She includes flight deck rated for day and night operations, Chinooks, Seahawks, Blackhawks, Kiowas, Apaches, Ospreys, Sea Stallions, and Little Birds. There is storage and launch capability via the stern ramp for Zodiacs, ribs, and jet skis. The ship contains all the command and control and food services. A ship forward deployed for over a year can easily disappear amid an ocean filled with commercial shipping. And the Ocean Trader is not a commissioned vessel in the U.S. Navy or owned by the government, but leased from one of the largest ship operators and chartered by the Military Sealift Command. And I think that last bullet point there is something very, very interesting to focus on. Historically, historically, the government has had to build, commission, use its own assets and organizations. And I think what we've seen over the past several decades is the government pivoting towards using private assets and leasing them, or private companies, such as our social media companies, to overcome limitations of government power, such as the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. When people accept the end user license agreements, many of them basically revoke the limitations of the Fourth Amendment, and so therefore that data can be acquired for purchase or partnership by the government, and it does not breach the Fourth Amendment because the government did not collect it, and you, the individual, gave up those rights by acknowledging the end user license agreement. So we see very similar things here, where the government's not building its own asset, commissioning its own asset, using its own asset, but rather it is leasing an asset from a ship operator and putting it in the Military Sealift Command versus the actual Navy or Coast Guard or Army or Marines. Very interesting. Over in Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina's fall in Bangladesh worries neighboring India. So this could potentially be an additional destabilizing event in the world, and something to consider going forward is that we have one of the biggest population centers of textile producers and low barrier tech environments in the world, with one of the highest populations, potentially becoming even more destabilized, while it's also continuing to have clashes with China. On the note about the U.S. ship, here we see the U.S. military eyes Australia's Indian Ocean toehold to deter China. A remote Australian island close to an Indian Ocean choke point for Chinese oil shipments is on a list of possible locations for U.S. military construction aimed at deterring China, with the U.S. saying it may or may not support American forces. On this note, something I just recently came across during my searches for different jobs and opportunities out there. The U.S. government is currently posting a lot of jobs for intelligence analysts, and specifically at a certain company, which I have eyed jobs at for quite some time and had never, ever seen a post for that, but now I'm seeing dozens simultaneously, and their location is at the U.S. Capitol, which I find very intriguing, are the surrounding areas where you would expect to see intelligence analysts located. Very interesting sign of the times, an OSINT thing, if you will, open source intelligence. You have the pizza stuff, you have the gay bars, and now you have job postings happening for intelligence analyst positions over at the U.S. Capitol. Very interesting. Here in the UK, again, migrants in the UK say they reject Prime Minister Keir Starmer's funding and support, adding that they can do a better job at protecting themselves and their mosques. Very interesting interaction there. The government trying to protect them, offer aid, and they deny acceptance of it. And as I'm sure some of you heard by now, Tim Walz was selected by Kamala Harris to be a VP in the running. Tim Walz, I believe, was the governor of what was it? Minnesota. Don't you know? When Minneapolis was burning down and did nothing. California Energy Commission proposes state takeover of oil refineries. I saw this initial report a few days ago and thought nothing of it, but now it is popping up more and more. Something to pay attention to. We have a communist state that is thinking about doing communist things, socializing things. This was an interesting note. Discord has erupted between the Portland Police Bureau and the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department over Sheriff Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell's refusal to allow the booking of violators of the city's new prohibited camping ordinance. So here we see a Portland City Police facing off with a county sheriff's department. There are more and more signs of tension and lines being drawn all over the world. And so if that's happening, you have to ask what is going to follow on if these two sides where these lines are drawn don't back down. And if one side backs down, what happens to the beliefs and the culture of the other side? And that's why I think we're growing more towards existential standoffs between counterparties. And I think it's going to lead to chaos as the world redefines who's in power and who's not. A bombshell report revealed that Philip H. Gordon, National Security Advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris, seems to hold ties to a complex influence network operating at the behest of the Iranian government. Again and again, we are finding that more and more of our government officials have exposure to external government threats and alliances. Here's a Tim Walz moment. Tim Walz' virtue signals about atoning for his privilege as a white man. For Walz, this atonement included overt Jim Crow-style racial discrimination in healthcare. The Democrats have picked a very, very radical man to run for vice president. The lines are being drawn. One side, the two sides are going to face off, and one side, on the side of the lines, is going to lose in the coming futures with all these lines being drawn. Both sides are seeing it as existential. If both sides see it as existential threats, they will act as if it is an existential threat to their existence. You can fill in the blanks from there. Kellyanne Conway registers as a foreign agent for Ukraine. Longtime political advisor to former President Donald Trump has registered as a foreign agent to advocate pro-Ukrainian positions to U.S. officials. She will be paid $50,000 per month by Ukrainian billionaire businessman Viktor Pinchuk. Pinchuk's foundation has been a leading donor to U.S. philanthropies with political connections, including the Clinton Global Initiative run by former President Bill Clinton and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. Conway was the campaign manager for Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and later served in his administration for 3 years as a senior counselor to the president. Again and again, we see these people who surround politicians and who are politicians with outside alliances and making a lot of money for doing so. Our nation's government has been sold out to the highest bidders. And if you think your favorite politician does not fall into the camp, you just aren't looking hard enough or without enough bias. They are all sold out. All of them. Israeli outlet Yedioth Ahronoth reports that Canada has begun evacuating its diplomatic staff from Israel, we are seeing more and more countries evacuating their diplomatic staff from Israel. And you have to stop and wonder about this whole situation. Historically, that's not what happens in situations that actually turn into tumultuous events and trials and explosive events. That's not how it happens. It's something sudden or something with a ton of evidence that leads people to evacuate countries and companies and people to evacuate suddenly. That's not what we see here. We see this evacuation dragging out for over a week now of these different companies and countries and organizations and people evacuating their staff or requesting that their staff should leave. That is not historically how these things transpire. So you have to ask, why is this time different? Why is this an outlier in the pattern? The U.S. expresses concern over a potential Israeli preemptive action to thwart an Iran Axis assault. So what were we just talking about? If everybody is so sure that Iran is going to attack, why is the U.S. expressing concern about an Israeli preemptive attack? Well, if Israel is planning a preemptive attack, that gives all these countries, companies, organizations, individuals time to slowly exit the potential battlefield. If there was truly a surprise threat or threat from Iran coming, and there was evidence of that getting ready to start, it would be very easy for everyone to collectively say, get out of the way, or the surprise attack would happen and everybody would mass evacuate suddenly. Requesting Jerusalem to provide early notification if the IDF initiates a strike. Well, if we have no idea about what's going on, why do you need an early notification? If everybody's so sure that we're evacuating personnel, isn't there some data, some analysis, some operational intelligence that says there's a chance of this happening? Let's get people out of the way. Or are we building the narrative for it to happen? Back in 2014, there was a lieutenant colonel that was talking about how he was concerned that the U.S. was getting ready to attack North Korea because of the psychological operations that he was familiar with that the U.S. government does when they're building the narrative for an attack. And he said 6 months before, he saw a bunch of information, psychological warfare, marketing happening, building a narrative about why the U.S. needed to attack North Korea. And then suddenly it all stopped. Interesting. A lieutenant colonel from psychological warfare operations was speaking to that information, and that's what he had to say about it. So what do we see happening over the past week? Building a narrative. Iran's a threat. Lebanon's a threat. We have to attack. Very, very interesting psychological warfare stuff. Northern Ireland, militarized police protecting immigrant hotels. Let's go ahead and take a watch here. And I just realized my audio was off that whole time. So if we go back to the conversation of assets versus risks, what do countries and organizations and individuals seek to do with their lives? That's to protect their assets and de-risk. And so here you see the police protecting what I would assume is they would consider assets, and you also see them attacking what they see as a risk. It's that simple. I usually don't show this stuff, and I wanted to use it as a reason to explain why I don't show this stuff. We should expect for there to be drones anywhere near the area where there's a conflict. I don't think we need to cover that a drone is specifically flying in Romania close to potential conflict zones. So I just wanted to put this in here as a reason why I don't cover this stuff. These drones are always up in the air doing stuff. monitoring things. It's just whether or not we get the data and the intel. There's so much of it, so much saturation that it's not worth covering. I just wanted to use that as an example to explain. And here we see more confusion, right? We see it appears Iran is going to do stuff. Iran is going to do stuff. Lebanon's going to do stuff. But then we say U.S. intelligence says they have detected Iranian movements that could initiate an attack against Israel, indicate an attack against Israel might be coming. So you see those words, detected, could, might. Again, this seems like narrative building, and that's from CNN, which we know is a mouthpiece for government. Nasrallah, Iran is obligated to fight after the assassination of Haniyeh in Tehran. So a bunch of statements here from Nasrallah today. There's a lot more than this, but I find it interesting that we see all of these comments being made, but we don't see any action. My mind wanders a lot on these topics, so I won't get too far into there. Another comment from him, if we want, all the Israeli factories in the north will be destroyed within an hour. Another comment, Israel is the one who chose escalation. Our response will be strong and effective. New update for flights going in and out of Israel. EasyJet announces it will not resume flights to Israel until at least March 2025. So interesting data points. Why didn't all of the airlines or a bunch of airlines make a choice to stop flights when government travel advisories went out, when governments began evacuating their personnel? And it's been ongoing for some time now, and we're just seeing more and more companies slowly decide to participate. From Borrell, representative of the EU, Middle East on brink of war of unknown proportions. So one bullet could be fired. That could be war, right? One missile could be fired. 100,000 bullets and missiles could be fired. There's a lot of this might be undefined data, undefined analysis, these comments that seem like narrative building in order to cause fear and generate support for preparing for war. We have seen this again and again from Western nations. What does this say? Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's leader in the Gaza Strip, has officially been appointed as its new leader following the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. From what I heard, there were a lot of celebrations going on about that in Gaza. I have no confirmation on this post, and it could be narrative building from opposition forces. I don't know. This says BlackRock has asked that Ukrainian soldiers not be buried on the land it owns in Ukraine. Representatives from BlackRock recently visited Kiev and requested that soldiers no longer be buried in the ground. They have already bought 47% of Ukraine's land. Again, I have no confirmation of this. Just something, if you want to go look it up on your own, might be worth investigating. It would maybe provide a lot of context about the war. I mean, could you pay a government to help you clean house to obtain the assets of raw land, earth, mineral materials by having a war happen that wipes out the population there? I think there's a lot bigger, grander scheme happening with all of this war stuff than what we realize, and the banks involved and the hedge funds involved and the tens of trillions of dollars involved and the war machine involved, and who benefits from it. It's not the individuals fighting on the front lines. It's not the civilians of these countries. It's the rulers, it's the oligarchs of these various countries that benefit from it all, short term and long term. If you show me the incentive, I will show you the outcome, right? So clearing the land via war. We see more heavily armed non-native individuals in the UK. It seems like things did cool down quite a bit during the work week, as I was saying in earlier videos. The question is, will there be this peak and trough that starts to form with the weekends and the work week between these groups and the kinetic energy involved? We'll have to wait to find out, but as of now, it does seem like things are cooling off. We've got some non-native folks burning cars now. We've got some non-native folks riding around in vehicles. Let's go ahead and take a watch. We'll have to be careful of copyrighted material. Yeah, so we've got what appear to be some non-natives riding around in a vehicle as if they think they're a SWAT team kind of thing, patrolling the streets. We've got Israel breaking the sound barrier over Lebanon, breaking windows, rocking windows. Additionally, from Israel, dozens of ultra-Orthodox broke into the Tel HaShomer army recruitment base in protest of their draft notices. So another intra-country conflict brewing. We see a lot of intra-country conflicts brewing now, whether it's in Portland, whether it's here in the U.S. between different political factions, whether that's in the U.K., in Ireland, in France, here in Israel. We're seeing more intra-country conflicts on the horizon or already undergoing. Putin has asked Iran to avoid civilian casualties in its response against Israel, says Reuters. And this is interesting. Putin asks Iran to avoid civilian casualties in response. Sources says, and it says to respond calmly. This almost seems like it could be a way to save face while not responding to Israel in order to mitigate instigating a war there. It's about saving face, right? Iran doesn't want to lose face by not responding, or Lebanon or Hezbollah, they don't want to lose face by not responding to the attacks that have been occurring, knowing full well that Israel and the U.S. appear to be trying to goad them into a war. Here from Ukraine, I still continue to see more and more of these images. I've been seeing them for a long time. 16 men tried to leave Ukraine in a refrigeration truck. Unfortunately, they were detained by officers. Here we see someone being, person here is going to be put into the vehicle in Ukraine and taken to participate in the conflict. A Czech mercenary was sentenced in Prague to 7 years in strict regime for looting and illegal service in the Ukrainian army. So we see more bifurcations happening in the Baltic regions. It's an interesting video. Go ahead and take a watch. We have jets flying over in Kursk. Attacks happening.
Это, блядь, догорает, вон тачка, нахуй, даже хуй пожарка едет, понял? Тут пизда полная, лянь, ёб твою мать. Ебать, нахуй,
It could be Su-25 Froggers. I believe they're Su-25s. Here in Baghdad, supposedly, we have some sort of force gathering in Baghdad happening. Looks like we might have some copyrighted material in here, not sure, so we'll go ahead and turn that down. Interesting. Not sure what that is all about. And the rest of this is pretty much repetitive of everything we've seen before. Complete chaos in Bangladesh parliament as the country is now under full military control. Here we have Thought Police arrested due to Facebook comments straight out of 1984 Old Royal Handbook. So we have people being arrested for making comments on social media. We're going to see the same stuff continue as this all heads down the same path. Muslim non-native streaming from Birmingham, UK confesses we are taking over the UK. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
In the bus they're joining in, lad. Man's on the bus. We're taking over UK now. Guys. Look in the bus they're joining in as well again, man. In the bus they're joining in, lad. Man's on the bus. We're taking over.
So we essentially have open declarations of war. Supposedly this is from Elon Musk. I haven't looked it up to verify, but he has been saying a lot of similar things to this recently. In 2030 for making a Facebook comment that the UK government didn't like, and it shows Peter Griffin getting the chair, if you know that meme. But that does seem like where we are heading, folks. With that, that's all I have for this update today. I will be keeping an eye on events for things that are sudden and worth covering. Other than that, I will see you next time. Until then, stay exponentially aware.